I never thought I'd be the guy writing this kind of story, but here we are. My name's Matt, and I've been married to Lisa for about 5 years now. We seemed like the perfect couple, or at least I thought so. She's always been a bit difficult, bitchy, super demanding, and she loves to lie her way out of everything. Still, I always believed she loved me, or at least I convinced myself of that. The signs started early, honestly. Small things. Missing stuff in the fridge, her ignoring my calls when she was supposedly out with friends, and her getting way more defensive when I asked about her days. I'd catch her texting late at night, but whenever I peeked at her phone, she'd give me that bullshit smile, saying she was just talking to her sister or her coworker. I bought her a new phone once because she said her old one was acting up. Turns out she was hiding a whole new set of messages from some guy named Jake. I found out months later that she'd been sneaking out to meet him whenever she said she was working late, and I just ignore the gut feeling, because I wanted to trust her. Then came the night I found out something that hit me like a punch to the gut. It was a quiet Tuesday, and I was out running errands. I needed a few special ingredients for a dinner I wanted to surprise her with, a nice homemade meal, just something different. I decided to do it myself so I could finally impress her. I was just about to head to the kitchen when I noticed the security system's footage on my phone. I'd installed it a while ago, mostly just to keep tabs on the house because she's so unpredictable. I wasn't planning to check that night, but I was curious. Sometimes I'd see her sneaking out or bringing in strange guys, and I wanted to catch her in the act. What I saw that night turned my stomach. The camera caught her in our kitchen, where I thought she was preparing a surprise dish, with a guy I didn't recognize at first. He was tall, muscular, with a swagger I didn't like. They were in my kitchen, and from the angle I could see her leaning over the counter, whispering, and then things got intense. I saw her hand on his chest, and then she was kissing him. Not a quick peck, but full-on making out right there in our home. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. That's when I realized she's been lying to me all this time, pretending everything was perfect while she's been cheating on me with some guy she met, apparently, while I was working my ass off trying to build us a future. I watched for a minute, stunned, trying to process what I was seeing. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I knew she was bitchy and difficult and maybe a little manipulative, but I didn't think she'd cheat, especially not with some random guy, let alone in our own kitchen. It was so intimate, so raw, that I felt sick. When she finally looked up from her kiss, I saw her glance at the camera. She froze, then just turned around and started tidying up as if she didn't have a care in the world. That was the moment I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't just let this slide, not after catching her red-handed. I didn't sleep. That night, my mind kept circling around what I'd seen, replaying that footage over and over. I felt so betrayed, angry, and sad all at once. I kept asking myself how she could do this to me after everything we'd been through. I thought about the lies, the sneaking around, and how she always painted herself as the victim whenever I called her out on something. I kept wondering what I did wrong, where I went wrong, but deep down I knew she was the one who crossed the line. I had to talk to her, confront her face to face. The thing was, I wasn't sure if I was ready for her to lie her way out again, or if I'd finally have the guts to do what I knew I had to do. When she finally came home later that night, she acted like everything was normal, smiling, pretending she didn't see me glaring at her. I remember feeling my fists clench and my stomach tighten. I didn't want to yell, not yet. I decided I'd give her a chance to explain herself, but I already knew the truth. Nothing she said could take away what I saw that night. Still, I had to hear her lie, had to see if she'd come up with some bullshit excuse or if she'd finally admit she's been screwing around behind my back. She looked at me with that bitchy little smirk she always wears when she thinks she's winning or getting away with something. I asked her outright what she was doing in the kitchen with Jake, and her eyes widened just a little, enough for me to see her panic. She stammered, then said she was just trying to prepare a surprise meal, but I didn't buy it. I told her I saw everything, that I knew she'd been cheating. Her face twisted into this nasty sneer, and she said I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure. That's her favorite line, "You're just insecure," or "You're paranoid," whenever she gets caught. But I knew better now. I knew she'd been lying for weeks, maybe longer. That night I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd been punched repeatedly. I'd always thought she was this strong, bitchy woman who could take anything, but the truth was, I'd never felt more powerless in my life. The whole thing felt like a punch in the gut, worse than I ever expected. My trust, my belief in us was shattered. I used to think our relationship was solid, mistakes and all, but now I wonder if it was just a house of cards waiting to fall. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with so much. One thing was clear. I was not going to let her get away with this forever. I had plans, even if I wasn't sure what I'd do next. All I know is, I was done being the fool, and I was damn sure I'd find some way to make her pay for this betrayal. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind kept spinning, replaying the footage, her sneering face, and the way she lied so effortlessly. I was furious, but at the same time I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. My stomach was in knots, and I knew I couldn't just sit around moping. I had to figure out what I was going to do next, and honestly, I wasn't in a hurry to make a fool of myself by rushing into anything. Instead, I decided to gather more evidence. I wanted to be absolutely sure before I confronted her again. So I spent the next couple of days watching her carefully, noting her patterns, her excuses, and her excuses. I installed a few more cameras around the house, especially in the bedroom and her phone line, so I could get a clear picture of what she was up to. She started acting even more bitchy, snapping at me for no reason, accusing me of being paranoid, and trying to turn things around like I was the one at fault. Every time she did it, I just kept my calm, knowing I had her on the ropes. What really made me angry was how she lied through her teeth about everything. She kept insisting she was just stressed, that I was overthinking, or that I was crazy for accusing her. She threw tantrums, called me controlling, and even tried to guilt me into dropping it, saying I was ruining everything with my suspicions. But I knew better. I had seen her with Jake and I had the footage to prove it. Still, I didn't want to just blow up and ruin everything in the heat of the moment. I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would hit her where it hurt. One evening, I decided to do something bold. I went out and bought a voice recorder, the kind you hide in a pocket or a purse. I planned to record her next time she started her usual bullshit, lying, gaslighting, maybe even trying to deny everything again. I wanted her to slip up even just once so I'd have irrefutable proof of her lies. That night, I sat in the living room pretending to watch TV while she was in the kitchen, bitching about how I was crazy and trust issues or whatever else she could come up with. I turned on the recorder and just listened, letting her talk. What she said that night, I swear, was almost comical. She was going off about how I was just jealous because I didn't understand her, how Jake was just a friend, and that I was the one making a huge deal out of nothing. She even threw in some classic lines about how I was possessive and controlling, trying to make herself look like the victim. I kept recording, my fingers gripping the edge of the couch. I knew I had enough evidence now to make her squirm. The next day, I sat her down, cold, calm, and collected. I told her I had been recording her conversations, that I knew everything, and that she could lie all she wanted, but I had the proof. Her face turned red and she started spitting out more lies, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that Jake was just helping her with some cooking, that she never meant for me to find out like this. She even had the nerve to say I was crazy for thinking she'd cheat on me, that I was insecure, that her love for me was real. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I was done with her bullshit. I told her I'd seen enough, that I wasn't going to be lied to anymore, and that I was finished. I said I was going to leave her and take some time to think about everything. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, saying she didn't want to lose me, that she loved me, that it was all a mistake. She begged me to forgive her, said she'd do anything to fix it. But I looked at her and realized deep down I didn't believe a word of it. She had lied so many times I doubted she could ever be honest again. That morning I started packing my stuff. I didn't want to stay in a house where I was just a pawn in her game. As I was leaving, she threw one last tantrum, calling me cold, heartless, and a bunch of other shit. Honestly, I didn't care. I felt numb. All I could think about was how blindsided I'd been, how I'd trusted her, and how she'd betrayed me in the worst way. I told her I'd be back to pick up the rest of my things, but that I was done. Done with the lying, the cheating, the manipulations. In the days that followed, I felt like I was in a fog. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to find where I went wrong. I felt broken, angry, and incredibly stupid for ever believing her. But at the same time, I knew I had to move on. I couldn't stay in that mess. Thing I've learned from all this is that some women, Lisa being a prime example, are just manipulative, selfish, and only care about themselves. They'll lie, cheat, and break your heart without a second thought if it suits their needs. And honestly, I think she's going to keep doing it until she gets caught or she ruins herself completely. Right now, I'm trying to pick up the pieces. It hurts like hell, but I know I'll be okay. I've learned to trust my instincts a little more and to never ignore the gut feeling that tells you someone isn't who they say they are. If there's one thing I want to tell anyone out there dealing with this kind of betrayal, trust your damn instincts. Because when it's over, all that's left is the wreckage, and you've got to decide whether to rebuild or walk away. After I moved out, I thought I'd feel better, but honestly, it just got worse before it got better. The initial shock wore off, but the pain was still raw. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw her kissing Jake, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I started questioning everything about our marriage, everything I believed in. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she cheat in our own house, in our own kitchen? It made me sick to think she'd been sneaking around, pretending to be the loving wife while secretly screwing some guy in my home. I spent days decompressing, trying to piece everything together. I knew I had evidence, those recordings, so I kept reviewing them, listening to her lies and her fake tears. It was almost surreal how good she was at playing the victim when she was really the villain. I remembered how she'd always said she wanted security, how she loved our life together, but then I realized she'd been secretly planning her escape, or maybe just her own version of happiness, at my expense. One thing that kept bothering me was how she kept lying about Jake. Her stories kept changing. At first, it was just helping with a surprise dish. Then it was just a friend. Then she'd say they only kissed once. And finally, she'd try to convince me she'd never meant for it to go beyond that. But I knew better. I had the footage. I knew she'd been lying through her teeth, trying to make herself look innocent. And honestly, it made me furious how she could just spin such elaborate stories to cover her ass. I started to realize that her bitchy attitude was just a shield, a way for her to keep people at arm's length, to make sure nobody saw the real her. She's manipulative, selfish, and completely self-centered. I remember one night, after a week of just being alone and processing everything, I got a call from a private investigator I'd secretly hired. I didn't want to confront her blindly, so I decided to cover all my bases. The pie told me she was meeting Jake again, and this time it was in a hotel downtown. That sealed it for me. I knew I had to act fast, but I didn't want to do anything rash. Instead, I devised a plan. I wanted her to see she couldn't get away with it, not anymore. I knew she'd try to deny everything, so I decided to confront her with the evidence. My recordings, the hotel footage, the messages she'd sent. I was also going to tell her that I was done. No more lies, no more hiding. I wanted her to realize I wasn't going to be the idiot anymore, blindly trusting her. One Saturday, I reached out to her and told her I needed to talk. She was surprised, but I could tell she was nervous. She threw out some bullshit about how she'd been under a lot of stress, but I cut her off. I told her I knew everything about Jake, about the secret meetings, about the nights she was sneaking out. Her face twisted into a sneer, then a mask of anger. She denied everything, of course, but I just pulled out my phone and played the recordings. Her jaw dropped when she heard her own voice, lying and gaslighting. "You think you can just lie your way out of this?" I asked her, voice cold as ice. "You've been screwing around in our house behind my back, and now you're trying to act like I'm the problem." She started crying, but it was fake. I could see right through her tears, just another manipulation tactic. She told me I was crazy, that I was trying to ruin her, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I told her I was done with her lies. and that I would be taking legal steps if she kept denying everything. The worst part was watching her try to guilt trip me, say I was betraying her, that I was destroying our marriage, but honestly I felt nothing but relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally in control. She kept blabbering, trying to turn things around, but I just told her I didn't want to hear her bullshit anymore. I'd seen the truth, and she couldn't change that. I left her standing there, crying and screaming while I walked out with my head high. Since then, I've been trying to pick up the pieces. I've started therapy, working through all the anger and sadness. It's hard, no doubt, feeling like I got played for a fool, but I know I'm better off without her. The thing I've learned from all this is that some women are just trash, pure and simple. They lie, cheat, and manipulate without a second thought, all while acting like victims when they get caught. And honestly, I'm still furious she did this all in my house, in my life, where I thought I was safe. But I refuse to let her ruin me. I'm rebuilding one step at a time, and I won't let her take that away from me. The biggest lesson I've taken away is this: trust your instincts and don't ignore the signs. If someone shows you who they are, even if it's ugly, believe them. Because once you find out the truth, there's no going back. You either accept it and move on or stay stuck in that mess. I chose to move on, and honestly, I feel a little stronger for it, even if the scars are still fresh. After I confronted her that day, everything started moving faster than I expected. She kept begging, crying, telling me I was overreacting, that it was just a mistake, that she loved me too much to lose me over some stupid fling. Her words were rehearsed, her tears manufactured, but I knew better. I'd caught her in her own trap, and I wasn't about to let her spin her way out of it again. I told her I gathered enough evidence to send her packing, and that I was done playing her game. That night I stayed in a hotel. I needed space to think, to breathe, and most of all, to plan my next move. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the sneaking around, the way she'd so effortlessly lied to my face. I'd never felt so betrayed, so humiliated, and honestly so angry. How could she do this to me after all we'd been through? I had never seen her as the kind of woman who'd cheat, but now I knew better. She was manipulative, controlling, and selfish. I realized that her bitchy attitude was just a mask, a way to keep people at arm's length and hide her true nature. Over the next few days, I made some calls, gathered more evidence, and started to plan my revenge. I knew I had her on the ropes now, but I wanted to make sure she understood that she couldn't just lie her way out of what she did. I paid a private investigator to follow her around, just to be certain, because I didn't want to leave any room for doubt. Turns out she was still meeting Jake, still sneaking around behind my back. That was all I needed. I decided I'd expose her once and for all, in a way she couldn't wiggle out of. I didn't want to just walk away and let her have the last word. No, I wanted her to see the full extent of her betrayal, how it felt to be completely blindsided, how it felt to lose everything you think is real. So I set up a plan to confront her with all the evidence, to do it publicly if I had to. I even had a few friends who knew about the situation, ready to support me if she tried to spin it again. I was prepared for her tantrums, her lies, her manipulations. I knew she was good at twisting things around, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. One evening, I called her and told her I wanted to meet in person. She hesitated, but I could hear the annoyance in her voice. When she arrived, I was waiting with all the evidence spread out on the table, screenshots of her messages, videos from the security cameras, and the recordings I'd made. Her face turned pale, then red with anger. She flipped out, calling me every name in the book, saying I was trying to ruin her, that I was just jealous and insecure. I just sat back and listened, feeling the weight of everything I'd uncovered. I told her, I know what you did. I know about Jake, about the nights you've been sneaking out, about the lies you've told me to cover your ass. Her eyes darted around, trying to find a way out, but she couldn't deny it. Her excuses and lies fell apart under the weight of the evidence. I saw her trying to manipulate the situation, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I was done wasting my energy on her bullshit. Her reaction was classic. She started crying again, this fake sobbing act she always pulled when she got caught. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I was leaving for good, that I was done wasting my time with someone who only saw me as a backup plan. I told her she had burned her bridges and that I'd be filing for divorce. That was the moment I finally felt free. Her face contorted with rage, then with despair. She spat out some more lies, trying to turn it around, but I just stood there, calm and collected. The aftermath was like a storm passing through. I moved out completely, cleaned the house out, and blocked her from my life. My friends told me I was a fool for sticking around so long, but honestly, I didn't want to leave until I had irrefutable proof. Now, I feel a strange mixture of relief and anger. Relief because I finally see her for what she is, an unfaithful manipulator. Anger because she did this in my house, in my life, and I let her get away with so much for so long. I've learned that some people, no matter how bitchy or manipulative, will do whatever it takes to get what they want, even if it destroys everything. It's a harsh lesson, but one I needed to learn. I won't be letting anyone walk all over me again. From now on, I'm trusting my instincts and watching for the red flags. I hope anyone reading this who's in a similar situation sees that honesty and evidence are your best weapons. Don't let them lie their way out, because when you finally see the truth, it's better to face it head-on than to keep living in denial. The weeks after the confrontation were a blur of emotions. I felt numb most days, like I'd been drained of everything: hope, trust, even my self-esteem. I started seeing a therapist not just to handle the heartbreak, but to understand how I let this happen in the first place. Honestly, part of me still laments that I didn't see the signs sooner, that I was so blind in love, or maybe just too scared to face the truth. But deep down, I knew I had done everything I could, and at some point it's on her. The biggest shock was realizing just how much she had lied and manipulated. She kept trying to call, text, even show up at my new apartment, begging me to forgive her, insisting she was sorry and that she really loved me. Sometimes I'd listen, but most of the time I'd just ignore her. I knew better now. I knew she didn't love me, she just loved herself and what she could get away with. That realization hit hard, but it also set me free. I knew I couldn't stay in that toxic cycle anymore. The thing that really opened my eyes was how she kept trying to paint herself as the victim. "You're overreacting," she'd say. "You're just jealous. Or you don't understand how hard I've been trying." Her words were meant to guilt-trip me into feeling sorry for her, but honestly I felt nothing but disdain. I saw her true face, the manipulative, entitled bitch who thinks she can get away with anything. The more she begged, the more I saw her for what she really was: a liar and a cheat. I decided to cut ties completely. I blocked her on every social platform, changed my phone number, and even moved to a new place. I didn't want to keep reliving the pain or giving her any hope of coming back. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that the man she was trying to manipulate was gone, replaced by someone who finally saw her for who she was. It hurt, but I knew it was necessary. I was tired of being a pawn in her game. Meanwhile, I started reconnecting with friends and family. Some of them knew bits of what was happening, but I kept most of it to myself. I needed to process everything at my own pace. I also threw myself into my work and hobbies, anything to keep my mind busy. I even took up cooking again, which was a weird coincidence considering everything. I'd always loved to cook, but after everything I'd almost lost interest. Now, I was determined to find joy in the kitchen again, even if I had to do it alone. One thing I've come to realize is that I'm stronger than I thought. Despite the pain, I'm surviving. The betrayal hurt like hell, but it also taught me a lot: that not everyone who appears perfect is truly good inside. That some women, like Lisa, are just manipulative, selfish creatures who will do anything for their own benefit, no matter how much they tear down others in the process. And that ultimately I deserve better. I've started to rebuild my life slowly but surely. I know I'll never forget what she did, but I also know I won't let it define me. Now I'm focused on moving forward, on healing, and on trusting myself again. It's a long road, but I'm determined to get there. I want anyone reading this to understand that even in the worst betrayals, there's a way out. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to walk away if someone is dragging you down. Because in the end, you're the only one who can decide what's worth fighting for and what's better left behind. I don't regret the pain I've gone through. It's made me more cautious, more aware. And I hope anyone else going through something similar takes this as a warning. Don't ignore the signs and never settle for a lie when the truth is right in front of you. Because trust me, the aftermath of betrayal is ugly, but living in lies is even worse. It might hurt now, but I believe that someday I'll look back and be grateful I finally saw her for what she truly was. Now I've come to a place where I can breathe again, even if the wounds are still fresh. The final realization hit me hard. I spent so much time trying to fix what was broken, hoping she'd change, hoping she'd see reason. But truthfully, some people don't want to be fixed. They just want what they can get away with. That's something I refuse to accept anymore. I've learned to see through the lies. And most importantly, I've learned that I don't need someone like her in my life to be happy or complete. Looking back, I see a lot of missed signals, a lot of red flags I ignored because I was blinded by love or maybe by hope that she'd finally change. But that hope was misplaced. If anything, her actions proved she was only interested in herself, her needs, her lies, her manipulations. It's a brutal lesson, but one I've had to learn the hard way. And honestly, I wish I'd seen it sooner. Maybe I'd have saved myself some of the pain, some of the heartbreak. But then again, maybe I wouldn't have learned what I did. The thing I want to leave everyone with, especially those who might be in a similar situation, is this: pay attention to the signs. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore that little voice in your head telling you to look deeper. When you do find out the truth, face it head on. Don't let them gaslight you or manipulate you into doubting yourself. Because at the end of the day, your happiness depends on your ability to see the reality clearly and to walk away when it's necessary. I've learned that revenge isn't always about hurting someone back. Sometimes it's just about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. For me, that meant leaving her behind, cutting all contact, and rebuilding from scratch. I needed to remind myself that I'm worth more than someone's lies and betrayal. That's the hardest lesson, but also the most empowering. Now I focus on myself. I've started dating again, carefully this time. I'm rebuilding my trust, learning to believe that there are good women out there, women who won't manipulate or cheat. I still get angry sometimes, but I channel that into my work, my hobbies, my new relationships. I'm better now, stronger, more cautious. And I know that I'll never let anyone take that away from me again. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, it's this: don't be afraid to walk away. No matter how much you love someone or how much you want things to work out, if they lie, cheat, or manipulate, they're not worth your pain. Trust your gut, gather your evidence, and be willing to let go. Because in the end, your happiness and self-respect matter more than any relationship built on lies. And as I close this chapter of my life, I feel a strange sense of closure. I won't forget what happened, but I refuse to let her define me. I'm moving forward, wiser and more aware. I've lost nothing that I truly needed, only someone who was never meant to stay. Life will go on, even after the deepest betrayal, and I'll keep rebuilding, one honest, real step at a time.